An African woman cared for the Arab executive's three 18-year-old sons. Until this happened, for years she was invisible. Just the African woman in the background, cleaning the marble floors, preparing meals, and caring for the Arab executive's three sons, all the same age, all raised in luxury. At 18, the boys were handsome, rebellious, and unpredictable. Adira had watched them grow, protected them, and loved them like her own. But the day she walked into the study and overheard a conversation not meant for her ears, everything changed. What followed was a chain of events so intense, so devastating, that even the billionaire himself couldn't undo the damage. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more emotional and inspiring stories like this directly to you. This is a story of loyalty, hidden pain, and a truth that shook a mansion built on silence. Stay with us. The Al Karim estate rose like a silent fortress on the outskirts of Abu Dhabi. 5 stories of white stone, glass, and guarded gates. From the outside, it was perfection. Inside, it was a kingdom ruled not by one man, but by his absence. Sheikh Nadim Al Karim, one of the wealthiest and most private oil executives in the region, was rarely home. His empire kept him moving. But within the cold halls of that home, Adira moved with quiet grace. She had been hired 7 years ago when the boys were just 11. Her references were impeccable, her background spotless. She was originally from Ghana, had worked in Saudi households, spoke fluent Arabic and English, and knew the rules: stay silent, stay loyal, stay invisible. But Adira had something rare: heart. And over time, that heart became the thing that raised the boys. They called her Mama A, even though she wasn't their mother. Even though she slept in a small room near the kitchen while they lived in luxury upstairs. She knew their allergies, their favorite meals, the tone in their voices when they were lying. And when their real mother passed, something no one ever spoke of, Adira became more than a caretaker. She became their center. Each of the 3 boys, now 18, was a different fire to manage. There was Kai's, the charming one. He had a magnetic smile, drove too fast, and flirted with anything that moved. He reminded Adira too much of his father. Then came Yazin, the quiet, calculating twin. Always reading, always watching. He didn't speak unless necessary, but when he did, it left a mark. There was something mysterious in his silence, something Adira couldn't quite name. And finally Tariq, the hot-blooded artist. He painted on walls, on ceilings, on his own skin. He played music too loud and broke rules as if he were allergic to them. He also broke hearts. Adira once caught him crying at 3 a.m., and he swore her to silence with one look. She loved them all, fiercely, but she knew her place. Until that one morning. It was the beginning of the holy month, and the house was quieter than usual. The staff had been reduced for privacy, and Sheikh Nadim was due to return that evening for an important family gathering. Adira woke early, as always, to prepare the breakfast table and make sure the boys had what they needed before fasting began. She walked past the study, normally locked, and noticed the door slightly ajar. She froze. That door was never left open. Inside, she heard a voice. Not one of the boys, not their father, a woman. And then, another voice, a boy's voice. Young, desperate. Adira's heart beat faster. She knew better than to eavesdrop. But something instinctual made her step forward, just enough to see through the crack. What she saw inside didn't make sense. A strange woman stood in front of her massive wooden desk, flipping through what looked like birth certificates. And behind her, tied loosely to a chair, was a boy. Not one of the triplets. Another boy. Same age. Same face. Adira's body turned cold. She stepped back quietly, not breathing, every nerve in her body tingling. Suddenly, a hand touched her shoulder. She turned sharply. It was Yazin. His face was blank, his eyes unreadable. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said quietly. Adira tried to speak, but nothing came out. Yazin took her arm gently but firmly. "Come," he whispered. "I need to show you something before they find out." Before who found out? What had she just seen? Who was that boy? And why? Why did he look exactly like her boys? As she followed Yazin down the marble hallway, one thought echoed in her mind like a warning. Everything I thought I knew about this family is a lie. Adira's sandals tapped softly against the marble as Yazin led her toward the west wing of the mansion, a section she was rarely allowed to enter. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was fear or confusion, but everything inside her warned her that once she crossed this threshold, there would be no return to the life she knew. Yazin opened a tall wooden door with a golden handle, revealing a corridor lined with ornate paintings, portraits of the family lineage, ancient scripts, a large oil painting of Sheikh Nadim when he was young, cradling a baby in his arms. But the baby's face had been painted over with a faint layer of gold leaf, making it indistinguishable. Adira had never noticed that before. Yazin moved quickly, as if he had done this many times before. "I'm showing you this because I trust you," he said. "Not even Tariq or Kai's knows. My father, he would never allow this." They stopped in front of a hidden panel in the wall. Yazin pressed a small carved lion's head embedded in the molding, and the wall creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into dim light. Adira hesitated. "Please," Yazin said, voice steady. "You saw him. You deserve to know." She stepped inside. The air was cooler here, almost underground. The staircase descended into a modest room that looked like a study, but more secretive. There were filing cabinets, photographs, maps, and on the central table, documents laid out in perfect order. Yazin flicked on a small lamp. Adira's eyes widened. There were 4 birth certificates. 4. Each one carried the same last name. Al-Karim, same birth date, same hospital. "Quadruplets," Yazin said. "But one of us was hidden." Adira covered her mouth. "Why?" Yazin leaned over the table, pointing to the 4th certificate. "His name is Ramy. He's our brother, our real brother, but our father sent him away before we could even remember. He said one son didn't survive childbirth. But it was a lie. Ramy was taken to be raised elsewhere. Paid off, forgotten." Adira shook her head. "But why would he do that?" Yazin's lips tightened. "Power." He gestured to a newspaper clipping. It was from 19 years ago. The headline read, "Nadim Al-Karim welcomes rare triplets. Future of empire begins here." Below was a picture of Sheikh Nadim with 3 newborns in swaddling silk. "One heir is a story. 3 is a legend," Yazin murmured. 4 is chaos. Our father believes in image. He believed one more son would weaken our narrative, dilute our legacy, so he chose to erase one. Adira stared at the photo, then back at Yazin. "And now, why is Ramy here?" Yazin looked her straight in the eyes. "He's here because he found out. He tracked us down. He wants to meet us, to be part of this family. But my father, he doesn't know yet, and he mustn't." Adira took a step back. "That woman in the study, who is she?" "She's a fixer," Yazin said bitterly. "She was sent to clean up the mess. Our father has people like that. If she finds out Ramy is here, he'll disappear again. Or worse." Adira's chest tightened. "You're protecting him." Yazin nodded. "And you want me to protect him too." "I need you," he said, voice suddenly full of something Adira had rarely seen in him. Vulnerability. "You're the only one who ever looked out for us. You raised us. You know who we are, better than our own father. I know this is asking too much, but he needs someone like you." Adira turned away, struggling to breathe. This wasn't part of the life she agreed to. She came here to clean, to cook, to care, not to be caught in a war inside the richest family in the country. But her heart had already decided. She looked back at Yazin. "Where is Ramy now?" Yazin opened a drawer and pulled out a key. "He's safe, but not for long." Adira took the key. "Then we don't have time." As they left the hidden room, Adira didn't notice the small, blinking red light behind one of the bookshelves, recording everything. And miles away, inside a black luxury vehicle, Sheikh Nadim watched the footage on a screen built into the seat in front of him. His face remained calm, unreadable, but his eyes narrowed, and his voice, low and cold, whispered one word: "Adira." The door creaked open slowly, revealing a small, dimly lit guest house behind the mansion. It was used occasionally by traveling staff or discreet guests of the Sheikh, but tonight it held a secret the family never meant to face. Adira stepped inside, heart pounding. the key still warm in her hand. She wasn't sure what she expected. Someone fragile, angry, broken. But the boy who turned to face her was none of those things. Ramy looked just like them. Same height, same deep amber eyes, the same sharply defined jawline that came from generations of Al-Karim men. But there was a softness in him too, something gentler, something untouched by the weight of luxury and pressure. He stood, startled at first. "You're not Yazin." "No," Adira said softly. "I'm Adira, the woman who raised your brothers." Ramy stared at her a long moment, then gave a half smile. "Then I guess we've met before. In a way." She stepped closer. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." He shrugged, but it didn't hide the pain in his voice. "You don't have to be. I grew up with a good family. They loved me. But I always knew something was missing. I never knew why I didn't look like anyone. Until I turned 16 and found a letter hidden in a drawer from a nurse at the hospital. She left just enough clues." Adira's heart sank. "And now you're here." He nodded. "I didn't come for revenge. I came for truth. And maybe to know who I am." She looked at him for a moment. There was something quiet and beautiful in his presence, like the world hadn't crushed him yet. "But it's dangerous," she whispered. "Your father, he doesn't know you are here. And the woman who was in the study?" "I know," Ramy said. "I heard them talking before they brought me here. She said she can make people disappear without leaving a single fingerprint." Adira closed her eyes. The Sheikh's world had always been shrouded in secrets and silence. But this boy had risked everything for a connection that had been stolen from him. "Yazin wants to help," she said. "He's risking everything too." Ramy looked down, hands clenched. "I met him yesterday. He told me not to stay long, but I could see it in his face. He didn't want me to leave." Adira placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You have a right to be here. You are his son too." Ramy blinked quickly, eyes glassing. "I just want to meet my brothers, to stand in the same room as them, even if it's just once." Suddenly there was a sound, wheels on gravel. Adira rushed to the window, lifting the curtain slightly. A black SUV rolled silently through the back entrance of the estate. Two men in dark suits stepped out. Her blood ran cold. "They're here." Ramy moved to the window. "Is it him?" "No," she whispered. "It's worse. Those are his men." Adira turned to him, grabbing his hands. "You need to hide, now." "But where?" "The basement. Behind the wine rack, there's a panel. I'll lock it from the outside. No one will find you." He didn't argue. He just ran. Seconds later, heavy knocks echoed on the guest house door. Adira took a deep breath, steadied herself, and opened it. One of the men smiled politely. "Evening, ma'am. We were told there might be some unusual activity out here. Just making sure the property is secure." Adira nodded. "Only me here, cleaning up." The man glanced past her into the room. His partner lingered behind him, one hand inside his coat. Adira kept her smile. "Would you like some tea?" The man stared at her a beat too long. "No, that won't be necessary." Then without warning, he stepped inside. Adira's heart hammered. She moved calmly, walking to the table as if nothing was wrong. The second man entered behind him, scanning everything. Adira turned, her voice light. "Careful not to trip. There's a loose tile by the stove." The men walked slowly, eyes sharp, but after a tense minute, they turned back toward the door. "Thank you for your time," the first man said. Adira smiled. "Of course." They left. She waited 5 full minutes before opening the hidden panel. Ramy crawled out, pale and trembling. "I thought they had me," he whispered. Adira hugged him tightly. "They will, if we don't act fast." But what she didn't know was that the second man had left behind a small black device beneath the guest house table, blinking red. A silent alarm. They knew someone was hiding here. And Sheikh Nadim? He was no longer watching from a distance. He was already on the estate. The roar of the engine echoed across the stone courtyard. Just past midnight, under the pale wash of moonlight, Sheikh Nadim al-Karim stepped out of his armored Maybach. His crisp white thobe flowed behind him like a shadow, and his black agal sat perfectly above his cold, unreadable eyes. He didn't glance at the security detail flanking him. His silence was command enough. He didn't come through the front door. He didn't announce his return. He entered his own mansion like a ghost, silent, sudden, and full of intention. Inside the estate, the hallways were still, but not for long. Yazin heard it first, the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps that never rushed, never faltered. He was in the library, the lights dimmed, studying old ledgers from their father's oil ventures. When the sound reached his ears, he closed the book and stood slowly. His heart quickened, but he kept his breath steady. He had expected this, just not so soon. Sheikh Nadim turned the corner and found his son standing there, composed like a soldier in dress uniform. "You've been busy," the sheikh said, voice low. Yazin didn't blink. "You watched the footage." His father nodded once. "Enough to know you disobeyed me." Yazin folded his arms. "I didn't know there was a command to follow. You never told us the truth to begin with." The sheikh stepped forward, his presence towering. "There's a reason some truths are buried, and you went digging." There was no rage in his voice. That made it worse. It was surgical, controlled fury beneath marble skin. "I found our brother," Yazin said boldly. "His name is Ramy, and he deserves to know who he is." "He knows," Nadim snapped, for the first time letting a crack show. "And he also knew to stay away. You stole his life from him." "I gave him a life. Better one boy live quietly than four be torn apart." Yazin's voice trembled, but held strong. "We're not torn apart. We're already broken. Because of your silence." A long silence followed. Then coldly Nadim said, "Where is he?" Yazin said nothing. His father stepped closer. "Where is the boy?" At that exact moment, Adira was back in her small kitchen, pacing, her nerves on fire. Ramy sat at the table, visibly shaking. She had tried to feed him something warm, but he couldn't eat. Every creak of the walls made him flinch. "They'll find me," he said quietly. "I should have never come." "You came for your brothers," Adira replied, gripping the edge of the counter. "And they needed you more than you know." She reached into a drawer, pulling out a phone. Not hers, one she kept hidden, for emergencies only. "Who are you calling?" Ramy asked. She looked him in the eyes. "Kai's." Adira dialed. Kai's answered after the third ring. His voice was groggy. "Adira, it's past midnight." She cut to the point. "Your father is here. He's looking for Ramy. Yazin can't protect him alone." There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "I'm coming," Kai said. He hung up before she could say another word. Kai's arrived at the guest house 10 minutes later, barefoot, wearing only gym pants and a t-shirt. His eyes were burning with adrenaline. He looked at Ramy and froze. It was like looking into a mirror with memories missing. "God," he whispered, "you really are." Ramy stood awkwardly. "I didn't want to cause trouble." Kai stepped forward, took his hand, and pulled him into a hug. "I don't care what he says," Kai murmured. "You're my brother." Adira watched, heart in her throat, but the moment was cut short by a knock, a loud, deliberate knock on the guest house door. They all turned. Kai whispered, "Hide him. Now." Adira led Ramy to the basement again. But just as she closed the panel, the door to the guest house burst open. Sheikh Nadim stood in the doorway. Behind him, two armed guards waited in silence. He looked at Kai's first. "Move." Kai's didn't budge. "He's not leaving." "He is not part of this family," Nadim said. "You don't get to decide that anymore," Kais replied. The sheikh's voice rose, low and thunderous. "I built this name. I carried it through war, betrayal, politics. I built an empire from sand. I decide what carries my blood and what doesn't." Kai stepped between his father and the hallway. "Then you can go ahead and remove me too. Because if Ramy's not our brother, I don't want to be your son." Adira stared from the corner, frozen. Nadim looked at his son, breathing hard, fists clenched, then turned without a word and walked out. The guards followed, but none of them noticed the blinking red light beneath the dining table had just switched off. The silent alarm had already done its job. For the first time in years, the Al-Karim estate felt like it was cracking from the inside. The morning sun barely pierced the dark clouds hovering over the desert sky, and inside the guest house, silence had taken hold. Ramy sat on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped around his knees. His chest rose and fell quickly, like a boy trapped between two lives that didn't want him. Adira paced near the window. "He's not finished," she whispered. "Your father doesn't walk away like that. He's gathering his next move." Kai stood near the door, jaw clenched. "He doesn't scare me." Adira turned sharply. "He should. He's powerful, Kai's. And when powerful men feel cornered, they become dangerous." Yazin arrived quietly an hour later. His face was pale and his voice when he spoke was low and hollow. "Tarek knows everything now." Adira looked at him sharply. "And how did he react?" Yazin sat down, wiping sweat from his brow. "He punched a hole in his wall, threatened to leave the country, and then asked me where Ramy was." Adira raised a brow. "So complicated." Kai snorted. "That is Tarek." But before anyone could respond, footsteps echoed down the hallway, fast and heavy. Tarek burst through the guest house door like a storm. His curls were a mess, his eyes bloodshot, and his white shirt was half-buttoned and soaked with sweat. He stood there, breathing hard, staring at Ramy. The two boys locked eyes for a long, loaded moment. Ramy stood slowly. "You look like me," Tarek said. "You are me," Ramy answered softly. Tarek blinked, then let out a small laugh, the kind you make when the pain's too big to speak. "Do you paint?" he asked. "I draw," Ramy replied, "mostly faces. I like expressions." Tarek stepped forward, eyes wide. "That's wild. I started drawing when I was 9. It was the only thing that kept me from setting the place on fire." Adira stepped forward cautiously. "Tarek," but he didn't seem angry, just broken open. "You were the quiet in my storm," he said to no one, almost whispering. "And I didn't even know you existed." Ramy's voice cracked. "I wasn't supposed to exist." There was a pause. Then Tarek pulled him into a sudden, fierce hug. "You do now," he whispered. The four boys stood in a tight circle, and for the first time there were no guards, no servants, no threats, just brothers. But peace in the Al-Karim family never lasted long. That night the estate was invaded, not by force, but by silence. At 2 a.m. all the power went out. No lights, no cameras, no alarms. Adira woke instantly. Something was wrong. She grabbed her flashlight and opened her door just as Yazin texted. "They cut the main line, move." She ran barefoot down the hall and reached the guest house in seconds. But when she opened the door, her heart stopped. Ramy was gone. Kai sat up from the couch, dazed. "What?" "He was here an hour ago," Tarek shouted, stumbling to his feet. Adira's mind raced. "Check the east gate, now!" They ran. Yazin was already there. A black van sped down the private road, kicking up dust behind it. "It's him," Yazin said. The Sheikh. He had taken Ramy, and this time he wasn't coming back for a discussion. Inside the van, Ramy struggled against the restraints on his wrists. Sheikh Nadim sat across from him, face cold as stone. "You could have had a quiet life," he said. "I could have had a true one," Ramy snapped back. The Sheikh leaned forward, voice like steel. "You think you've won something? You're a headline, a crack in my empire, and cracks must be sealed. You can't erase me again." The Sheikh stared at him. "I don't have to. You'll erase yourself, unless your brothers decide otherwise." Ramy frowned. "What are you talking about?" Nadim didn't answer, but in the back of the estate, a courier delivered 4 sealed letters, one for each son. Inside, a simple message written in the Sheikh's hand. "You may keep one brother. The others must never speak of him again. Choose by morning." The letters lay unopened for what felt like forever. Each envelope was hand-delivered, hand-signed, sealed with the Al-Karim family crest. The weight of them wasn't in the paper. It was in the threat they carried, in the impossible decision etched in every curve of the Sheikh's elegant handwriting. Kai stared at his letter under the soft glow of his bedside lamp. He hadn't opened it yet. He didn't need to. He already knew what it said. Yazin sat cross-legged on the floor of the library, envelope open, letter unfolded in his hands. His jaw tightened with each line he reread. Choose one. Silence the rest. His father didn't write demands. He posed dilemmas wrapped in civility. Tarek burned his letter. He didn't even read it. "You don't ask me to erase blood," he said to no one, staring into the small flame until it devoured the threat whole. By sunrise, the mansion was colder than it had ever felt. Adira moved through it like a ghost, her eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. She checked every room, every hallway, every exit. Ramy was gone, taken into one of Sheikh Nadim's off-site compounds, they guessed. But no one knew where. No one had heard from him, not even a whisper. The breakfast table remained empty. No staff arrived. No guards lingered. Just silence and tension. And time, ticking toward morning. At 8 a.m., Sheikh Nadim summoned them. The four sons, minus one, entered the grand reception room. The curtains were drawn. The marble floors were polished like mirrors. Their father sat at the head of the long table, alone, dressed in ceremonial white. A single chair sat empty beside him. None of them sat. He spoke calmly. Each of you received my request. Kai stepped forward first. You're asking us to abandon our brother. I'm asking you to protect what this family stands for. Power? Tarek barked. Or pride? Nadim didn't flinch. Legacy? Yazin held up his letter. And what if we refuse? The sheikh leaned back. Then all of you lose everything. The company, the inheritance, the name. You'll walk out of here as strangers to the Al-Karim bloodline. Silence. Until Kai said, then maybe that's the only way we can live as brothers. The sheikh's face darkened, but Kai's pressed on. He's not a scandal. He's not a threat. He's just a boy who wanted his family. You buried him for convenience. You let us grow up broken because you couldn't manage one more name. Yazin added, we've spent our whole lives performing, playing the perfect sons, but we were never complete. And maybe that's why we always felt lost. Tarek stepped forward too. You told the world we were three flames born from the same spark. But there were four of us. We've always been incomplete. The sheikh's fingers twitched slightly on the table. He said nothing. So Kais asked the question, where is Ramy? A beat passed, then another, and finally Nadim sighed. Safe until I decide otherwise. Adira entered then, slowly, her presence cutting through the tension like incense in a tomb. You don't get to decide anymore, she said softly. Everyone turned. Adira's eyes were red, her back straight. In her hands was a small leather box, old, worn, and wrapped in a velvet ribbon. I found this in your late wife's closet, she said, placing it on the table. She hid it. Maybe from you. Maybe from herself. Nadim didn't move as she opened the box. Inside was a faded photo. A woman holding 4 babies. A date handwritten on the back. May 4th, the day I gave life to 4 boys. All of them mine, all of them worthy. The room fell still. Tarek stepped forward, took the photo in his hands, stared at it for a long time. Then he passed it to Kais, then to Yazin. Something in the air shifted. Nadim looked older now, smaller, weaker for the first time in his life. Adira's voice trembled. If your wife were here, she would choose all 4. So should you. No one spoke, until Nadim slowly stood. He didn't look at the photo, didn't touch the box. He walked toward the door, stopped, and said without turning, Ramy will return tonight. His name will not be erased, but don't expect the world to embrace him. Kais muttered, we don't need the world. We just need each other. And with that, the sheikh disappeared down the hallway, leaving behind him thing more fragile than wealth, a chance for healing. Ramy stepped out of the black SUV just after dusk. The compound gates creaked open, and the warm lights from the house spilled into the driveway. He hesitated before walking forward, his bag slung over his shoulder, uncertainty still clinging to his breath. Kais was the first to greet him. He didn't say anything, just pulled Ramy into a long, quiet hug. Then Tarek appeared, holding a sketchbook. You draw, right? He said, offering him a pencil. Let's see what you've got. Yazin followed, a quiet nod exchanged between brothers, now whole. Adira watched from the window, tears silently falling. After all the secrets, all the silence, the house finally sounded alive again. And in the study, the sheikh sat alone, watching but not interfering. Not yet. This wasn't acceptance, but it was a beginning. That night, the dining table was full for the first time in years. No staff, no servants, Just four boys seated side by side. There was laughter, awkward pauses, shared glances. Memories were exchanged like currency. Ramy spoke little, but when he did, the others listened. Tarek showed him the rooftop garden. Kais offered him the keys to the older sports car they never used. Yazin invited him to help redesign part of the family foundation. No one mentioned the father until Adira walked in with dessert and said softly, "He watched your drawings, Ramy, the ones you left behind. He didn't throw them away." Ramy nodded. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe, one day. Months passed. Whispers in the business world spread. The fourth Al-Karim's son has returned. Some questioned the Sheikh's silence. Others feared what it meant for the empire. But inside the Al-Karim house, change had settled in. The boys worked together on art, on business, on rebuilding trust. One day a press release was sent. The Al-Karim legacy is one of four pillars: equal, unbreakable, true. The photo attached showed all four sons standing in front of the estate, arms over shoulders. Behind them, through a tall window, stood Adira. And further back, watching quietly, the Sheikh. For once, he said nothing, because sometimes the most powerful thing a man can do is let go.